It was crazy how many people DM'd us talking about wanting to hear more about the relationship. They loved hearing about your boundaries and red flags.
When we would clash, it was about essentially just not having the same standards or boundaries as far as dating. And I think every relationship goes through that. It's a lot. It's having a lot of grace, because even as much as we're like, oh, you got to meet each other's love language and this and that, we know that, and we still fall short. And we just recently got in an argument about not meeting each other's love languages. That's not an option.
This is your teammate.
So therefore, because it's not an option, you got to make it work. You got to figure it out. It doesn't mean you ignore the issues. You really,
it allows you to work it out. That doesn't mean that divorce shouldn't happen or anything like that. What we're saying is these are skills and principles that have helped us out. And we do have arguments. We do actually, and a lot of times, have very opposing opinions, I think. Welcome to More Than Dope Podcast, brought to you by Alani's Booty Peach. You know how it is. Sponsored by them because we're drinking it. And if they'd like to send us some drinks, hey, go for it. But you know what it is, a More Than Dope Podcast with Patrick
and Katie.
Here we go. We're married. We've got 4 kids under 8. And we've got 8 businesses that we run together, a franchise. And
wait, which franchise? Why are we all decked out in pink?
Well, you know. Yeah, Crumble Cookies franchise. Here we go.
Crumble Cookies.
So, on this episode, we're going to continue our conversation. It was crazy how many people DM'd us talking about wanting to hear more about the relationship and how, actually all about your boundaries. They loved hearing about your boundaries and red flags. So, we're going to continue. If you missed that, go ahead, go to our first episode, watch that, and then you'll be ready for this one. If not, hey, the principles keep flowing. The principles keep rolling.
It's true. So where we left off was we broke up. Well, I broke up with you.
We
while
did.
Our dating days. We had some crazy stories, and then
go back to the soup story.
The first breakup is what we talked about, and then we were on to the other breakups. But they were all pretty much about the same thing.
Yeah.
And crossing boundaries. So it really was about boundaries.
Yeah, the reason why we decided to podcast and talk about this is because we've been married for 11 years, and one of the things that we've enjoyed or talked about is how much we actually learned during dating. And that year and a half and what it actually taught us moving forward. That having taken that time, at least for us, to work a lot of things out really laid the groundwork of how we were going to work things out within our marriage and in the future. You know, how do you argue? How do you, what are the parameters and things like that?
Well, the thing is that we actually got along really, really well. So naturally, it just flowed. But then when we would clash, it was about essentially just not having the same standards or boundaries as far as dating. And I think every relationship goes through that. So whether that's dating, whether that's marriage, but no matter what, you go through that eventually.
Because it's crazy to think now, looking back, that you want to get 2 people that grew up in very different households, bring them together and say, okay, you guys are going to learn how to work things out the same exact way. And it's really unrealistic. A lot of dating, at least I thought, was, hey, how to find the person that you can have the most fun with, the person that seems the least amount of drama, the person that just seems the happiest and go lucky. That's the perspective according to single Pat. But really,
well, it's also you don't know what you don't know. So as much as you're pick this person that you're so in love with, yes, you are still in love with that person later in life, but it's more so about how well do you guys work together in turmoil, in trials, and hardships, and all of those things is really what makes or breaks relationships.
And this is the goal of our podcast: is people are DMing us, telling us, hey, keep going deeper on this concept. Our whole purpose of this podcast really is to take the conversations that we have at home and make them a little bit more public, with the goal of, hey, if we can entertain you, we're all for it. If we can inspire, I think that's even better. And educate based on what we've learned and things that have helped us in our marriage. So if you want to be educated, inspired, and entertained, hey, you're at the right place. And if you have any other tidbits you want to add, go ahead and add them in the comments or keep DMing us and we'll keep having these conversations. But for today, it's about, so how did you find out the difference between what was a red flag and you need to walk away, and what were boundaries that would then allow for a more perfect relationship and that you should like stay with? And even though we're talking about dating, this applies to marriage. This applies to business partnerships. This applies to friendships. Like, at what point do I know when to walk? And at what point do I know that I just got to put in a little bit more work and something beautiful can flourish?
Yeah. Well, I think it was hard. So I grew up, my biggest fear was being cheated on, like being married and being cheated on. And my dad always, I remember growing up too, would say, well, if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. So he always really uplifted me to know of my worth, and that you pretty much don't, he would say, like, you don't take crap from anyone. But with that, meaning like stuff still happens, you have to know what it is that you want. And there's certain things, especially in relationships and marriage, you have to compromise on, but there's certain things that you just say, this is something that I cannot compromise on. And either you meet me here or it's just not going to work out.
So how'd you figure that out? Like, let's be upfront. I was kind of a little wild buck, but really it was throttled by fear. I wanted to be married. I wanted to love and respect the person that I married. And so my rules was, I thought, hey, you get certain access once you get married, but you can't have that same access like we talked about last time, the phone, being able to go through somebody's phone. I was like, yeah, my wife can, but not while I'm dating, or be able to put certain parameters that I couldn't talk to people in a certain way. I was like, well, yeah, my wife, but not now. So the question is like, how do you take somebody that you come in a relationship with and influence them in such a manner versus, nowadays, I think when I talk to buddies, it's like, hey, a lot of the conversations are like, my wife wants to change me, or wife wants to control this. And the man doesn't feel like he has value, really, because all it is his wife trying to change or control him. So that's from a male's perspective. So how do you allow both to grow? How do you allow somebody like myself to change and have a fertile soil where change can happen, or improvement? We'll say improvement. And then again, back to, how do you know you should just walk?
That's a hard one. But I think, okay, there's stages to it. It's also like, you don't take someone out to ice cream and you're like, hand me my phone first date, let me go through your phone, and if not, like, you're not marriage material. There's levels to it. So, and you have to, it's about trust and gaining each other's trust and building to the level of trust. And then once you get to the level of saying, hey, maybe I think this person might be marriage material, for me, it was, I had to see, I wanted to show and expose and talk and get to the nitty gritty of everything possible and date as if we are married. So then therefore, hey, this is like how we're, and you can only do so much at that point because later comes kids or whatever in life. But to be both fully open of being on the same team, and it's about what's best for the team.
Versus how can I change this man to be what I want? It's like, what do we want to have happen here?
And I think having open communication is key.
Yeah.
So, when we dated, I had no desire to go through your phone until it got to a point of, I felt like you were hiding your phone from me.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, if we are going to go down this road of marriage together, I can't hide anything, and I don't want you to hide anything, because I got to know what I'm getting myself into, and you got to know what you're getting yourself into. And then we have to be like, all right, you down? I'm down. And then we jump together.
Because that's a partnership, right?
Right.
Like, you will have everything together, whether it's a business partnership, whether it's a marriage. Now, friendships are a little bit different. There's space there on purpose. But when you're going to get into a loving relationship where you want to create something, or a business relationship where you're going to create more together and divide whatever benefits or dividends come from it, you really have to be open about everything. Your finances, your goals, your desires, even our relationship, right? Like, you let it be known, like, hey, if we're going down this road together, I got to know who you're talking to. I got to know who your friends are.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's the most freeing thing that I've received in our marriage, is literally consecrating and sharing everything together.
But-
our finances, our relationship, our Facebooks, our social media.
And you were open to that. You could have easily, and there was some restraint going on with it, and a back and forth and a tug and a pull. But at the end of the day, when we were able to just be fully free to each other and be like, all right, because at the end of it, that not wanting to show me your phone was due to things that you were doing that shouldn't have been on a level of marriage. So, and the reason is because
and I thought, hey,
that
we're just
was
dating.
But the reason that you did that was it was due to a core of fear coming out.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
it was rooted in fear. So again, it wasn't a matter of, okay, now he lets me go through it. It helped me actually learn something more about you, of saying about your past, of where this fear comes from, of why it is that way. And it's a level of being able to connect more with each other and understand each other more, for if that fear comes up again or is triggered in ways, I can recognize it as that, instead of seeing it at a surface level of being like, oh, why is it this happening?
And I love that perspective, because as a guy, we think our spouse is just hunting, or our girlfriend is just hunting to catch us, right? To always be caught. When it's really like, get away from that. It's not about being caught or hiding. It's about, we come into a relationship with weaknesses and strengths. How do we as a whole benefit from those
Men,
strengths
women.
and weaknesses, and identifying that? That's helped us a lot actually going into business. Is really early on in our relationship, we identified what each other's core strengths were, and yours really was intuition. And it took time for me to have to realize that actually is one of your superpowers, and when to listen and when not to listen, even in times that aren't logical. And so I think in a relationship, it's saying, as I get into this relationship with this person that I love them for a reason. What do they bring to the table? How do they help my weaknesses become stronger? And it's not a matter of them being better or not. I think that's what happens. If you can wipe that slate clean in a relationship through open conversation, open and honest. Hey, I think these are my strengths, Katie, that I bring to the table. And I think these are some of my weaknesses. Or being open to you telling me, because it's usually your spouse or your significant other telling you what your weaknesses are, because they're really blatant to them when they're not to ourselves. But I think, like puzzle pieces, putting it on the table and realizing what they are, then as a team, you can come together and make the right picture, versus kind of doing it separately and thinking that, you're just trying to find my weaknesses to prove fault. I think that's when it's it's like a cycle that, you're never going to get out of. Once you get out of that, then you can work on the relationship.
Yeah. I think it's also important that knowing that no matter who you marry, you do this life with, a lot of it's whose baggage you're going to choose to work through. Like, no matter what, everyone has their own baggage. And being able to almost take ownership of, like, yeah, I've got baggage, you've got baggage. And then when that kind of shows itself and presents itself and it comes up in the relationship, being okay that we're not perfect, or that, you have issues, I have issues, everyone's got issues. Because then you're able to just identify it and work through it. Because how many times people just deflect it, or they just try to avoid these hard combos, or they try to blame the person for it and not see themselves, or, there's a lot of that you were really open to, which a lot of women say men can't change. And
they can.
It's true, but you were also very open to it, whereas men are usually like, oh, she's just trying to change me. She's just trying to take my phone and go through my things. So it's both like a trust issues of not knowing the pure intentions of each other and what the end goal is. And I think that's where people get so disconnected, is that the end goal is us. Like, this is our team we're going to go through. So what are you not getting? What am I not getting? And how can we meet each other and work on our own stuff, and also being open enough to self-reflect and being like, oh, that is interesting. Why is this coming up?
I always think about it like Cesar Millan, the dog trainer, goes there and he goes, and all of a sudden it's like the dog and the trainer don't get along. Things aren't working. They're like, this dog's a yapper. And Cesar Millan comes in with his confidence, comes in with his stuff. Dog all of a sudden does something out of character. And the dog's like, and everybody's going to be bugged. And I hope so. Leave it in the comments, because really it's understanding the relationship. I believe that the male relationship wants to know what standard he's being held to, what game we're playing, and what's my role in this. And it's not a matter of who's dominating who. It's a matter of what role are we playing and what natural needs do we have. And I believe that males have a natural need to provide, to produce, to be able to fix and solve problems and do things like that. And given the right companion, then the rules that are set within that relationship make the difference. Because when you look at Cesar Millan, when he comes in, what he's doing is creating boundaries with that dog and saying, hey, what am I okay with and what am I not okay with? And he's letting the dog know quickly what's going on. And even though guys are going to get upset saying I'm calling us dogs, hey, it is what it is, right? We want that natural praise and to know what's going on. And I think as the counterpart, your spouse can know that by saying, well, what is it that this person, what things should they exhibit? So for example, if I do things that to you might be small and petty, I might take out the garbage, I might do the dishes, but they're things that might not be in the norm, or things that, I might believe might have to do with your side of the fence, right? Mentally. But being able to praise that versus be like, well, finally you did the dishes, what kind of feeling you're going to elicit versus, hey, thanks, I appreciate that. The guy's like, oh, all right. And then people are going to say, what happens when he stops? Then he stops. But praise the things that you want more of versus pointing them out, because that relationship is almost like playing fetch. The dog runs, gets the ball, brings it back, is there praise. And then the comment's going to be like, well, then do we always have to praise? Well, yeah. Not on the same thing, on different things. But praise is a natural tendency, I think, that men want and we seek after, that we maybe get from our dads in the past, or that we get from our bosses, or that we get from being productive. And having that validation at home really builds that male self-esteem. And with that, helps us just then want to be able to be more sensitive. So I think it's a give and take. Might be going down the wrong direction.
No, I think the root of that is also love language, meaning that praise is also represents appreciation and acknowledgement of what you're doing, of who you are, that you're trying, and as we've talked about before, it would be, for me, love language at the beginning of our marriage, which also changes over time, was just quality time or words of affirmation. Whereas now, since having kids and just being split between so much and so much being taken from being a mom, a lot of that is now acts of service. So when you do the dishes, like, it is a big deal. And I think acknowledging that and knowing, again, getting on the same page of what our needs are, because it's like forever changing.
So glad you said it, because as a guy's perspective, when that change happens, there isn't a sign that says change is happening, redirection, reroute this way, right? Mm-hmm. So then the guy takes it as, oh, she's not into me anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, she used to want cuddles, words of affirmation, hang out. Now it's like, I need you to get this done, I need you to get that done. The guy might not do it. Then, his spouse is upset, and then he's trying to go and be like, hey, let's cuddle. And she's just bugged. And really, it's not a matter of losing desire or not. What I've learned from you is, as we evolve and the demands evolve, the love languages change. And I still remember you as like Katie Alaska, right? Where now I'm gonna get way more than that, girl.
I'm Katie. No, I'm just kidding.
Here, mom, CEO, business owner, highly active in the business, highly active in the community with our kids. Like, there's a different evolved Katie that I am so grateful for, that I think is like.
But I'm also
amazing.
very different from what I used to be.
That's what I
like.
mean.
I used
So
to
if I
be
picture
more
you-
chill and just super laid back and go with the flow and whatever, not whatever you said, but I didn't have strong opinions on there were some things I did, but whereas now, through having kids and going through hard and just growing and changing, that's the thing too. And in marriage, like, you don't realize how much people change, and it's a choice to also change, like, together, because we could very easily change. You could easily have not been down with a lot of I guess different characteristics that I have now that I didn't before, and you could close off, you could become doing your own thing, and then just naturally we branch our own ways. But it's really just choosing to learn of each other more and grow, and that's I think the hardest part of marriage is just really not the hardest, but one of the hardest is just really being open to continually learning about your spouse and growing, and just trying to
be that team. Like,
Yeah.
it's not that you change because you don't like me, or it's not that I've changed because I'm only seeking, let's say, career. It's how does our relationship evolve? And what are the current new strengths? What are the current weaknesses? How do we compensate for that together versus, well, they've changed, so I'm going to leave them. It's like, there is no leaving. And we talked about that when we first got married. We said, there's just no leaving. So we just don't talk about it. Like, how do you prevent divorce? You just don't say it. You just don't talk about it. Your mind just doesn't go there.
where we legit are like, we just don't say that word.
We don't make
Now-
jokes about it.
Yeah. Now, obviously, like, big stuff can still happen, and like that causes problems, but and go down that road even if you don't say it. But meaning, it is more so of a mental change, a mental shift that you have of being like, that's not an option.
This is your teammate.
So therefore, because it's not an option,
Figure
you got to
it out.
make it work. You got to figure it out. And it doesn't mean you ignore the issues. You really, you just,
It allows you to work
Gotta
it
be
out. That doesn't mean that
Mhm.
divorce shouldn't happen or anything like that. What we're saying is, these are skills and principles that have helped us out. And we do have arguments. We do actually, and a lot of times, have very opposing opinions. I think literally, if I'm like, oh, I like this, she's like, I don't like that. Not on purpose. It's just our natural tendencies aren't so on the same page that it just makes our marriage easy. It's actually, we have a very similar core, and we agree on our core, and how we get there are different ways. And so I think that's forced us to develop skills,
yeah.
to have to be like, okay, how do we still come to the middle versus like always having to argue?
Well, it's also having a lot of grace. And we can just keep going on. Like, it's having a lot of grace. Because even as much as we're like, oh, you got to meet each other's love language and this and that, we know that, and we still fall short. And we just recently got in an argument about